What if I told you that scientists may have already found proof of life after death and that it was covered up? That somewhere in a lab, buried in forgotten research, there's evidence that consciousness doesn't die with the body. It just moves on. It sounds like something out of a conspiracy theory, right? But what if I told you that some of the world's greatest scientific minds, from quantum physicists to neurosurgeons, have come shockingly close to uncovering the truth? Truth so unsettling, so paradigm-shifting, that it was either dismissed or intentionally buried. What happens after we die? Is there a part of us that continues beyond physical existence, or are we simply not allowed to know? Because if the answer is out there, the real question is, why are they hiding it? Let's find out. For centuries, the idea of an afterlife has been dismissed as religious belief, something outside the realm of science. But what if science itself was beginning to reveal something shocking? Let's start with the near-death experience, NDE. Across the world, people who have been clinically dead for minutes, even hours, have reported eerily similar experiences. A sense of leaving the body a tunnel, of light, meeting deceased loved ones, feeling of overwhelming peace, observing events happening around them while dead. Now, skeptics argue that these are just hallucinations, the brain's final flickers before shutting down. But here's the problem. Some of these patients report verifiable details about things that happened while they were clinically dead, things they couldn't have possibly seen or heard. Take the case of Dr. Pim van Lommel, a Dutch cardiologist who studied hundreds of cardiac arrest patients. One of his subjects, who was completely unconscious, described details of the hospital room with stunning accuracy, down to a surgical tool that nurses had misplaced. He had no pulse, no brain activity. By all accounts, he was gone. So how did he know? And this is just the beginning, because when we step into quantum physics, things get even stranger. Let's talk about consciousness, the mystery at the heart of the afterlife. Debate. Most scientists used to believe that consciousness is simply a byproduct of the brain, that when the brain dies, so do we. But here's where things get weird. A growing number of researchers believe that consciousness isn't created by the brain at all. Instead, they say the brain is more like a receiver, a biological machine that picks up consciousness. The way a TV picks up signals, meaning if the brain stops working, the signal doesn't vanish. It just exists elsewhere. This is where quantum mechanics comes in. Dr. Stuart Hameroff, an anesthesiologist, and Sir Roger Penrose, a physicist, proposed that consciousness is stored not in neurons, but in microtubules, tiny structures inside, brain cells that interact with quantum information. According to their theory, when we die, our consciousness isn't destroyed, it simply returns to the fabric of the universe. And they're not alone in thinking this. In 2014, researchers at the University of Southampton conducted a large-scale study of NDEs. They found that consciousness continued for minutes after clinical death, far longer than science could explain. So why isn't this front-page news? Because if we prove that consciousness survives death, what does that mean for everything we thought we knew about life? Of course, not everyone agrees. Skeptics argue that near-death experiences can be explained by oxygen deprivation, surges of brain activity before death, cultural expectations influencing hallucinations. They also point out that quantum physics is highly theoretical, and just because something is mathematically possible doesn't mean it's real. But here's the issue. If consciousness is just an illusion of the brain, then how do we explain people accurately describing events while brain dead? Children recalling past lives with verifiable details? The fact that some quantum physicists believe consciousness plays a role in shaping reality itself. And even more disturbing, if there was irrefutable evidence that consciousness continues after death, would we even be told? Because if we knew, it would change everything. Governments, religion, power structures. What happens when people realize death isn't the end? Who benefits from us not knowing the truth? Let's assume for a moment that science eventually proves the afterlife is real. How would that change the way we live? Would people be less afraid of death? Would we rethink our purpose, knowing that this life is just one step in a bigger journey? Or would it lead to chaos, with people taking risks, knowing there's something beyond? But here's the real kicker. What if the afterlife isn't what we think it is? What if we don't just move on, but rather our consciousness is recycled into new lives, new experiences, new realities? Some researchers, including Dr. Ian Stevenson at the University of Virginia, studied thousands of cases of children remembering past lives with eerily accurate details that were later confirmed. If that's true, what does it mean for you? What if your current life is just one chapter in an infinite cycle, and if so, how much of it is your choice? Here's the truth. For centuries, humanity has feared the unknown, especially death. But what if death isn't the end, but just a transition? What if scientists already know, but we're not ready for the truth? Because if we prove that consciousness never dies, if we prove that reality is far stranger than we ever imagined, then everything changes. And maybe that's why some knowledge is meant to stay hidden. So now the real question is, if you knew the truth, what would you do with it? And more importantly, what if someone or something doesn't want you to find out?